I'd like to welcome you all here today. Thanks for coming. My name is Sandagata, and I'll be speaking to you about making a connection between pieces of information, creating a theory, and applying that theory to see if it's accurate. So what we'll be using as an example is the relationship between crop efficiency, which I'll define later, and the rate of societal development and technological advancement. Crop efficiency is best shown in the example here. As we can see, wheat provides much more energy than it takes to cultivate it. The major interpretation here is that it was used by 4 major early civilizations. The Indus in Mesopotamia, where it was alternated with barley, China, where it was the secondary or winter crop to rice, and Egypt, where it was the major single crop source. So let's take a closer look at Egypt, which is probably the one that you know the most in this subject. As many of you know, Egypt was a riverine civilization with almost everything being based on the annual flooding of the Nile. Early civilizations had to devote an overwhelming majority of the work that could be performed by the civilization, which from now on we'll call societal work hours, on the production of food to ensure a stable and steady supply. If there was often a bad harvest, blight, or overpopulation, it ended up with major catastrophes. While overpopulation is a serious problem today, there was a large chance of a Malthusian catastrophe occurring at any point during Egypt's history, and was one of the large factors leading up to the Bronze Age collapse. Production of food was a massive societal undertaking, with a mass mobilization occurring during plowing and harvest seasons. Let's put this in comparison to our modern system and see how large the difference is. Egypt kept a population oscillating between 1 and 2 million, depending on wars or famines, which happens about once every 4 or so years. Meanwhile, in the 2015 US, 320 million. Egypt had almost 90% of its population devoted to producing enough food to feed the society, while here we have a fluctuating 2%. Surprising? Well, that's early Egypt, and the food production wasn't year-round. Instead, when slaves and farmers were not farming, they were requisitioned by the central government to work on large projects, such as irrigation, which allowed them to produce more food. Expand that trend, and we can see that while Egypt is still a food-focused society, the amount of time and work that has to expend on subsisting allows it to work on large projects that increase the efficiency, creating a snowball effect. The thing is, though, about the snowball effect, is that a higher initial results in a faster development, and that's what we're applying here. Greatly summarized, Egypt had a comparatively high initial, of course over 9,000 years or so. Got the idea? So let's expand this into the worldview, and answer the question as to why some societies develop into large populations with complex written cultures and advanced technologies, and others don't. It's easier to say why some did than when others didn't, but if we look simply at it in terms of what crops were available to certain societies, and how much energy and work time they had to expend in order to sustain their population, it's much easier. Where the early successful societies, such as Mesopotamia, China, Egypt, and the Indus Valley, and so on, used cereal crops like wheat and barley, other societies had to develop other, less efficient means of sustaining their population, giving them less initial, leading to them developing both differently and arguably less quickly. So let's examine some different groupings. You've got the initial Bronze Age civs, which we've seen already, then sweet potato in Kosovo and sub-Saharan Africa, potatoes and other tubers in South America, and more tubers and taro in Oceania. Barring any other influence just for comparison purposes, we can assume that cereals take precedence over starches and starches before anything else. So creating this type of anthropological theory is something that we've done over the year, but we have to prove it now. An example of how we typically did this here is outlining the logical progression and advent of sedentary agriculture, which we explored at the end of the second quarter. Anyways, as you can see on the screen, we created a system of events which would laterally lead to each other, building into what we did a year previously, and applied that system to the growth of all early civilization. While it might seem heavy-handed to attempt to describe all the individual histories that led up to these societies, we can circumvent this by using abstract terms that can be applied to most areas, or remaining as specific as possible to understand the train of events. Now let's apply it. Remember, we're trying to describe the relationship between crops that a society had available to it and the rate of advancement. We have a few options open to us to describe the rate, and the first one we'll examine is the population increase over time. That might be skewed by especially volatile or disease-prone regions. Next, being the source of a major religion or way of thought. That might work if not for the widespread rise of at least folk-level religion in all independent societies. We can work with that, though, because how nuanced a philosophy is can tell us quite a lot about the civilization it represents. The final one, though, is the increase of crop efficiency, because the society is focused on that, as we've mentioned before. Put it all together, and the theory we've developed is on the screen. Thanks for your time. So the theory will be coming up now, but what we've kind of spoken about throughout the year is like how to describe a relationship between something. And as soon as it comes up, here. So we can kind of see how it would be skewed and a few things we've left unconsidered here. But at this point, it can certainly be more nuanced, and it certainly will be, but developing ideas, that's what it is. Thanks. All right, so thanks everyone for your time.